Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Gaming News, where we discuss all things within the gaming industry. And first, I would like to say that I apologize for the lack of videos recently. There has been a lot going on in real life, everything ranging from articles that I've written to family members becoming hurt and needing to make sure that everything is okay with them, to issues with billing and invoicing and whatnot, and just generally playing catch up. My mental health was definitely a yo-yo throughout the last few weeks, and now we have finally come to a point where everything has stabilized. I go a little bit more in depth on Patreon in a previous post that you can go take a look at if you're curious to know what exactly happened. But otherwise, I will just sort of leave that here and move forward with the past week and a bit's worth of news, and any of the previous coverage that I was going to put in, I might just do some written post with the articles in question to talk a little bit about those things previously, so that you don't have to consume mass videos of gaming news that happened several weeks ago that may or may not be important to you today. So with that, we have a bunch of things to cover today, so I'm going to do my best to get through them as quickly as possible, and we're just going to start with the first topic. And the first thing I want to talk about is Destiny 2. Now, Destiny 2, we are in our final week before the next season, where we are going to get a new raid. We are going to have to level our artifact. We're going to get more story and find out what Callus is up to and whether or not we really had an impact on the witnesses' actions and what is leading up to Lightfall. So it's going to be an interesting time, but of course this means that we've also got Arc 3.0, so it's going to receive the same treatment as Void and Solar, as with Stasis that kicked it off originally in Beyond Light when Destiny 2 came to Steam. And what we are going to look at here is an article by Paul Tassi talking about something that I feel very much in alignment with, and I'm going to elaborate a little bit on it to sort of echo some of what Paul Tassi has said in this article. And I know that some people whom I've spoken to who do play the game looked at these articles and maybe had a differing opinion, which is completely and totally fine. So the article in question here, obviously, is Destiny 2 may kill its pinnacle power grind, should it? Now, I'm assuming that this article revolves mostly around rumors and theories and ideas about why do we really need light level anymore. Back in the day, I started in Forsaken, and back then there was a level up. You went from level 1 to level 50. And it had a story, or at least an introduction to the game, where you had to slowly unlock your supers, your various supers. You didn't have them given to you right away. You had to go and do specific missions that taught you how to use your new supers. And I started off with whatever the original one was. I want to say it was Solar. And then when I was finally given the opportunity to use Void, I pretty much stayed with Void. And then I did the sad and unfortunate Arc unlocking. And so I haven't been the biggest fan of the Arc 3.0, although it may bring some good stuff, which they did talk about in the previous TWABs. Anyways, then what they did was they changed from the power like leveling system to a light level system, almost like an item level, if you will. And so as time progressed in the game, the weapons and the armor would drop at a higher light level, almost as though it were an item level. And here we came into the same issues that other sort of MMOs end up with, which is a power creep that you start to have to change how you calculate what is balanced and what isn't balanced, and how much damage should some of these things really do. And they also have unveiled weapon crafting, so people have the opportunity to choose what perks, and to a degree they also can go after specific roles for their stats. And so no longer are you looking for the ultimate weapon, you're looking for the ultimate roles that work for you, that maybe you follow what the dim suggests for this is best in slot, or this is, this has got the best perks on it, or whatever. And usually there will be a notation of if it's good for PvE or PvP. Now, it means that when it comes to rating Grandmaster content and the champions, you have altered the experience to be less reliant upon your light level overall or the damage that you do. It's more understanding the mechanics and working together. And yes, you do need the light level in order to get the increases and get the artifact bonuses, to get some extra damage boost or some restoration or that kind of thing. But we seem to be moving a little bit further away from the light level requirement, especially when every single season all player characters are boosted to the minimum light level for that season, so that people can jump right in and get into the action and play with their friends. They're just maybe missing exotic weapons and items that could be useful to them. So this is where we're coming from, where we're looking at the game as a whole, how it has evolved, and whether or not the light level really matters anymore. And so this is kind of the argument that is being made in this article. So, in this article, he says that the idea being whispered about is that everything is going to potentially be rolled into the artifact. And in a way, I kind of agree. As you go through the season pass, you get experience bonus. You can now customize your ghost to have an additional experience bonus. And most people who play the game extensively bounty stack to make sure that they can level up quickly, especially those of us that are doing day one raid, and we only have 3 days to grind whatever we can in terms of levels to have the champion mods and to maybe have some of the boosts and the unique mods for our armor pieces in preparation for day one raid. And because we have such less time to prepare, a lot of us have been bounty stacking, and a lot of us are looking to boost our artifact level quickly and our season pass level quickly to get those items and to get those boosts, because even though we're going to be capped in the raid as per contest mode, we still are going to be hit hard by the creatures in the raid, because we don't know what to expect. We don't even know what raid it is yet until the showcase on the 23rd. So the idea of everything being rolled into the artifact, and also the customization with weapon crafting, we look like light level is less important to the greater sandbox of Destiny 2. So the current problem, which I also agree with, is the powerful and pinnacle grind is pretty apparent. It relies exclusively on RNG, outside of the extremely rare instances where you can target farm powerful or pinnacle drops, which is infrequent. So, for example, if you do not have the season pass, you do not have access to things like the Duality Dungeon, and for the first time in the game, the Duality Dungeon drops a pinnacle piece on each boss the first time you run it on that character for that week. So, if that is the greatest source, and also technically the fastest source of getting pinnacle, you are relying upon it dropping an armor or a weapon that is lower than what you already have. There are so many times where in the pinnacle grind you have received an armor piece that you already have at hard cap, and it doesn't give you the cloak that you're looking for example, or the headpiece that you're looking for example, because that's the one that isn't hard cap. And so it is completely random what you end up getting. And with the advent of weapon crafting and red borders to be able to make those weapons, a lot of times those weapons will drop ad nauseum when you're looking for a different weapon. So for example, I grabbed Beloved, a sniper rifle that was amazing, and I still love that weapon to this day. You need 5 patterns to unlock it to be able to choose your own perks. Well, that's great and all, but Beloved wasn't dropping for me, so every single week I went and bought the guaranteed red border per week to be able to have them. And then once I had my 5th one and I was in the middle of calibrating it, another red border Beloved dropped for me, and I'm like, well, that's great. I don't need it anymore. Could you please give me the weapons I am missing? And it's 100% reliant on RNG, and it's very frustrating. People are restricted in doing Grandmaster content if they do not have the hard power cap by the time Grandmasters come out. This is incredibly frustrating because it may just be one piece that's holding you back. So this is one of the fundamental problems. But then he goes on to talk about that everything might transfer into just experience grinding, which I think is a much better use of doing it, because most people, if they're trying to go after Grandmaster content or high-level content, it's almost faster to just increase your artifact bonus than it is to try and get those pinnacle pieces. Now, you're still going to go after them, but it's not easy. So, another argument for this pinnacle grind situation is that it forces you to experience a wider swath of the game. It forces you to go into Crucible, it forces you to go into Gambit, it forces you to go do the dungeons and whatnot, but it also means that new players have a much harder time of getting to that pinnacle cap. They will not be able to experience some of those endgame activities with their friends, even if they want to, especially if they just don't have the season pass to have access to half of the content. You're only given the first story mission or step of the mission if you're a free-to-play player. You don't have access to a ton of stuff in the game. You don't have access to a lot of the dungeons. You have to pay for those, which is something that I have railed against, saying that if you're looking to bring more people into the game, people are willing to support the game. People are willing to buy silver and buy items and work for things, but do not put dungeons that give you pinnacle gear behind a paywall, but allow them to walk into raids no problem. Like, it just feels disjointed to me, and I've always felt that. But with us being forced into doing these multiple activities to get Pinnacle, one, you might not be very good at it. I'm not particularly good at Crucible, but having just an experience-based system in order to get these things would actually be more beneficial, and leveling up your season pass to getting Pinnacle gear instead of being forced into activities that you may or may not want to do. It creates this weird problem where each week, I'm glad that they've changed it to a different raid and a different dungeon each week that will give you Pinnacle instead of doing the exact same activity over and over again. It forces people to experience more of the game, but it's also kind of putting certain people in a corner because they will not do those things. And I understand the logic behind you want people to play your game, but also know that people have their strengths and their weaknesses. And if people are just guaranteed a chunk of experience that will give them Pinnacle gear instead of having to go chase after 3 Gambit matches, 3 strikes, and 3, like, it's very dull and uninspired, and then people can go and do the activities that they actually want to do. They can go chase their titles, they can go chase emblems, they can go chase, success in doing solo flawless dungeons or lost sectors. They can do all of these other things without having to worry about, oh, well, I have to go and do my millions of things to hope for that +1 that I need. It's frustrating. And so I'm kind of in alignment with him in that I don't feel like light level is going to stay necessarily. I think that slowly Bungie is moving away from that in Destiny 2 based on the weapon crafting, based on the cycling of activities and whatnot, based on the boosting. They're trying to make it easier for people to want to do these things, but the Pinnacle grind as it stands is just incredibly frustrating. And I feel that coming into the next season and then coming into Lightfall, that hopefully this system will be better designed to make it more accessible for people to play the game, because the story is incredible and I want to see it succeed. I want there to be more people, but that is just my thoughts. I have gone way too long on Destiny. This is going to be a long video. I apologize. I might separate this out. Anyways, so what we're going to do now is talk about the next topic very briefly, which is talking about Riot Games. And Riot Games decided that they would do something that actually makes a lot of sense when you think about it. And it makes a lot of sense for multiple different reasons, not just for some of the reasons that are listed here, and this actually does lead into something else I'll talk about at the end of the video, which is Riot is now starting to delete old League of Legends accounts starting this month. So this was published on the 17th, and they are removing inactive players from League of Legends. The company is going to be clearing house, and there's a good reason behind it. The older and lesser used Riot accounts in the game will be removed permanently. Now, it may not work exactly how you think because there are conditions as to which accounts they will be permanently deleting. It's not going to be just blind willy-nilly, you haven't played in a little while and therefore you're going to lose your account. There are specific criteria for whether or not they're going to delete the account. So first, if the account is inactive and not being logged into and played is one of the most obvious pieces of criteria in this list. Secondly, if that account has not purchased anything like currency, or they haven't been given any currency, and therefore they haven't spent, a good amount in the video game showing that this is a player that may actually come back because they're financially invested, that is also coming into consideration. If it has had less than 20 hours played, it stands to reason that if it's an older account, you've got very little time into it, it stands to reason that the person is just not interested in the game, which again makes a lot of sense. And then finally, the account doesn't have any limited edition content in the game. So if you're a person who used to play but hasn't played in a little while because life kicked you in the teeth, you're not necessarily going to lose your account, especially if you've grabbed limited edition items, which I think is actually kind of a good thing when you consider it. So it's not just going to be any account. If you have an account, however, that reaches these criteria for whatever reason, you will have the chance to save your account. Players will receive an email warning them of the deletion, and while it will be removed if not addressed, players will at least have been notified that their account is going to be deleted. That will give them the chance to log back in, make sure their account isn't deleted so that they don't lose anything, or if there have been enough changes over time that they want to come back to the game, that is also a good thing, because you consider that there are countries that have forced military requirements, so you might be gone for a year or two out of a game because you're mandated by your government to do this, and therefore they might have played a lot but then had to go into the military for their term before they would have the opportunity to come back and play video games again. So there is a lot of sense, but that's not necessarily the only reason why Riot is doing this. They're planning on deleting League of Legends accounts as part of their official move to two-factor authentication. This will make sure that all accounts are more secure, but it will also help keep their information safe from those looking to steal accounts or misuse data. Something I'm going to talk about in a little while will also indicate that this is kind of huge. In another video or a post later, I will talk about how there have been a number of big name video game companies like Neopets and Bandai Namco having huge data breaches, and how even Twitch had a giant data breach supposedly, although we're not really clear on what all was received as a result of that. But to protect people's accounts, this is not necessarily a bad thing. So they're looking to eliminate accounts that potentially could be botters or spoofer accounts, or accounts that maybe were gotten into for the purpose of collecting data. There's a lot of good sort of things with making the move to two-factor authentication. Especially considering how many companies have had breaches recently. And again, this is something I'm going to refer to at the end of the video. So I think it's a good thing that Riot is doing this, but we'll have to wait and see how people feel about it and if it really makes a difference in the greater scheme of things, because again, people have had to deal with a number of data breaches. They happen all the time, and hopefully the video gaming industry really wisens up quickly and does something about it before it gets too out of hand, although that really just depends on a number of different things. So next up, we're going to talk about Twitch. And Twitch has a number of things going on. TwitchCon Amsterdam had a massive issue as multiple people ended up getting COVID in Amsterdam from going to TwitchCon. There were a number of people that talked about it because there was no masking or vaccination policy or anything like that. People felt as though they were safe and they decided to go anyways. And I have seen a number of different pictures from all over the place of just how many people were not wearing masks at the event or not being particularly safe. Now, because of that, the next TwitchCon in San Diego, a lot of people decided that they weren't going to attend because Twitch did not have a policy for COVID and really for anything else, because there's also the rise of monkeypox in a number of different places. So with that, Twitch looked at everything and decided that they were going to update their policy and tweeted saying that we've heard that you want a safer TwitchCon, so we are updating our policy. Masks will be required indoors, as well as either proof of vaccination or a negative COVID test before you go. Now, this tweet had very polarizing opinions from the wider community. There were a number of Twitch partners that hailed the adjustment and decided that they might actually purchase tickets to go to TwitchCon now because of the mandates. However, there were also a ton of Twitch partners and big name people who were vehemently against this policy, especially since originally they had purchased their tickets and TwitchCon did not allow for refunds as far as I know, although don't quote me on it. Now, with this tweet, of course, meant that there would be a bit of a fallout afterwards. There were a lot of people who were super happy about it and a lot of people who were very vocal about not liking the fact that there are policies, especially since there are other events that don't require masking or anything, that businesses are open again, that people feel much safer, and that COVID doesn't exist and the last 2 years was a waste of time and the numbers were just numbers and didn't really affect them at all. There's a lot of different things that people have said. Now, one of those people, of course, is Nick Merckx. We also had Trainwrecks. We also had a number of people from FaZe Clan become agitated by the new policy, and all of them were incredibly vocal on Twitter. Now, this article talks about how when TwitchCon announced their new safety requirements, the streaming community was shocked to see that there were a lot of popular streamers that spoke out against the precautions. Now, that is just insanity in my mind. But on the 12th, Twitch had tweeted that they had updated their policy to reflect the concern that people had coming out of TwitchCon Amsterdam, and now masks are required anytime attendees are inside, and you also can't get in unless you have proof of vaccination or a negative COVID test result. So if you are in a position where you cannot get vaccinated because it would be more harmful to your health than it would be to get the vaccine, there are certain people who cannot get the vaccine for legitimate reasons, would have to go to the convention with a negative COVID test to make sure that they could walk through the doors. Now, this obviously, like I said, was not taken particularly well by certain people, and in fact, many of them made it known on Twitter, and on that day, many of us turned around and blocked a ton of people who just decided to spout off the worst shit I have ever seen. It is kind of ridiculous. But it's partly because Twitch just seems to be like very half and half. You want to protect your people, but at the same time, you don't want to put in that much effort to protect the people. And it seems like to a lot of people, this was Twitch reacting to the fact that they didn't make as much money off of ticket sales and therefore decided to address it by appeasing the populace. Now, I don't know ultimately if that was the reason for the decision, but it's not unheard of that something like this would happen. And you can see right here that Nick Merckx from FaZe was not very impressed with the policy updates. Now, prior to this article, there was another article released by .esports that I found was very interesting, and it is this. The No Masks, No Vaccines, Nick Merckx opposes TwitchCon's COVID-19 regulations with his own event. So he was so vehemently against the change that he decided he would set his own event. Yep. Really, that's it. His event will, be doing whatever they want to do without masks, and he's already spent a lot of money. There's not going to be any requirements whatsoever, and come on down. So, he, along with a bunch of other FaZe Clan content creators, responded to Twitch's announcements with L. Shortly after responding, the FaZe Clan co-owner announced his own community meetup in a tweet. Now, I feel like FaZe is not doing themselves any favors in most of the esports that they are in, especially if these are your players, these are your representatives, and these are the face, if you will, of FaZe. If this is what you are going to show to the public, it really just shows that you don't give a shit about people. There are people who are seriously at risk, and just because you don't believe that COVID exists doesn't mean that other people don't. And you can say what you will about those people, but it's not up to FaZe Clan. It's not up to these people to decide what should and shouldn't happen. If you're upset about it, big deal. If you want to set up your own convention, sure, go for it. See if it's successful or not. If you break even or not, but do not sit there and judge people for their own decisions. They are people too. Seriously. But what I find particularly interesting about this is that FaZe Clan in particular has been actively vocal against the changes. I've also come across an article that shows that FaZe Clan entirely has lost 9.3 million just in the second quarter of this year. So whatever it is that they're doing, between the toxicity, between the bad takes on world events, between absolutely everything, they are not doing well as a community group. And I kind of find it funny that you're going to call out TwitchCon for whatever Twitch's reasons are, doesn't matter, but you are going to be the ones to call them out, saying that this is stupid, promoting fear and such a cash grab, whatever, and your own group comes in at a loss. I just find it amusing in reality. They raised $57.8 million in net proceeds while listing as a publicly traded company on the NetSQ. The revenue of $18.8 million for the period was up 19% from the previous quarter, but the net losses of $9.3 million compared to the $7.6 million for the same quarter in the previous year. So they went public hoping that they were going to increase their revenue, hoping that they would be one of the greatest esports organizations, whatever that happens to be. They even launched a Ghost Kitchen brand with DoorDash, signing on content creators, announcing new content series with the NFL, and then like becoming public, and that was still not enough. I think the writing is a little bit on the wall, but don't trust me. I would love to know your thoughts on the TwitchCon and FaZe Clan situation. I've never been a huge fan of FaZe Clan because of what they do, not because their players aren't good. There is a separation between really good players and really shitty takes. And you put your money where your mouth is, ultimately. And that's kind of where we stand on this particular topic. But let me know how you're feeling in Discord or on Patreon. I would love to know your thoughts. Next, we're going to talk about Embracer Group. Now, Embracer Group has gone through a lot of changes recently, and they were virtually unheard of before. But now people have really been taking notice of Embracer Group. So let us talk about an article from Games Industry Biz, who have changed their website. But Danielle Parti talks about how Embracer's net sales are up 107% from the first quarter. So the first quarter ended June 31st, and the Swedish giant reported net sales of 7.1 billion SEK, which is 682 million, up from 3.4 billion SEK previously during the year prior. It noted that this growth was predominantly driven by inorganic growth via subsidiaries bought in the last year. So, what we're talking about here is things like this. Embracer to acquire Lord of the Rings IP, Tripwire, Limited Run, and more. So, in absolute brief, Embracer Group acquires Middle-earth Enterprises, Limited Run, and Singtrix via new division Freemode. Tripwire Interactive and Tuxedo Labs acquired via subsidiary Saber Interactive. Embracer has done an additional acquisition that remains unannounced, so we don't even know what that is quite yet. And then aggregated upfront purchase price reaches $576 million. Now, Embracer said the acquisition was in line with its IP-driven transmedia strategy and expressed interest in exploring additional movies based on iconic characters such as Gandalf, Aragorn, Gollum, Galadriel, Eowyn, and other characters from the literary works of J.R.R. Tolkien, and continue to provide new opportunities for fans to explore this fictive world through merchandising and other experiences. And if you remember that Sony reached a deal with Bungie recently so that potentially the Bungie franchises can move into mass media like movies and television series and that kind of thing. Video gaming is becoming a much bigger entity, and Embracer is positioning itself. So the CEO, Lars Ring of Force commented, "Today, Embracer becomes an even better group. I am pleased to welcome an amazing group of entrepreneur-led companies to the Embracer family and to extend our portfolio with some truly remarkable IPs and franchises, including The Lord of the Rings. It is encouraging that our group has become a natural and preferred buyer of creator, growing, and profitable companies within gaming and entertainment. Several discussions with entrepreneurs now joining have been ongoing for more than 3 years before the stars aligned today, which underlines the importance of a long-term perspective in building our group," meaning that the acquisitions that we have just learned have been in the works for quite some time. Most of these deals to the gaming industry or to the world seem like they come out of nowhere, but in actual reality, the talks have to have come from previously, and they have to go through a lot of legal hoops and whatnot in order to allow for the sale, because the places like the United States and Canada have certain laws that prohibit complete and utter monopoly on a market. There has to be some form of competition. And so with all of these bigger name places like Embracer collecting as many IPs as possible that would potentially be profitable, this is why most companies are actually owned by much larger conglomerates that have diversified into various fields. And this is just sort of showing that this kind of thing takes time to negotiate. What if the companies don't want to sell? What kind of money are you going to offer? You have to go through a whole bunch of legal things. You have to go through a whole bunch of litigation in order to make sure that a deal is not fraudulent, that it actually goes through, that everybody is happy, that there are contract terms, etc., so on and so forth. Now, some of you may be wondering, who the hell even is Embracer Group, especially since they've only really become the forefront in video gaming in the last year or two. Well, IGN, as of today, August 19th, released an article that gives you a bit of a history as to how Embracer Group came up from not really being that well known to being one of the top dogs with all of these different studios. Right now, they have things like THQ Nordic, they have Coffee Stain, they have Saber Interactive, they have Gearbox Entertainment, they have Asmodee, who also just recently rebranded, Dark Horse, and a whole bunch of others. They have Metro by virtue of one of those, companies that they've previously acquired. They've got Darksiders. They've got a whole bunch of different games, and this entire article takes you from the beginning, from its first acquisitions, all the way up to current day, and this deal that they have made to get not only the Lord of the Rings franchise to expand into movies and television series and spin-offs, but they also recently made a deal with Square Enix, and they now have Crystal Dynamics, Eidos Montreal, and Square Enix Montreal, which only happened within the last couple of months. So they now also have Tomb Raider, Deus Ex, Legacy of Kain, and Thief. And we're very interested to see what happens with any and all of these franchises, because there's now a lot of them, and Embracer has positioned themselves to be a powerhouse. So if you're looking for more information about who Embracer Group is, what all they actually have, and some of the history, I will leave the IGN link below so that you can take a look, because the author did a good job of going and finding all of this information and putting it into one straight article that you can find out everything you need to know about the Embracer Group. And this brings us to the final topic, which I have only labeled as the internet, but that's because it is talking about video gaming, but it's not related to a specific video game company or a video game itself. This is more talking about the greater gaming industry, and I came across this article from Cybersecurity Hub, which is titled "Data Breaches on Gaming Sites Are Becoming More Common." And I wanted to bring this up because, again, we just talked briefly about how recently Bandai Namco, Neopets, and a whole bunch of other gaming companies have had massive breaches. And this is tackling some of that topic. So this was published today on the 19th. In July of this year, 3 prominent gaming sites, Roblox, Neopets, and Bandai Namco, were hit by data breaches within 3 weeks of each other. Roblox had 4 gigs of player data stolen. The data of up to 69 million players was exposed in the Neopets leak, and Bandai Namco, which publishes titles such as Elden Ring, Tekken, and Dark Souls, confirmed that a bad actor had gained unauthorized access to server group companies' internal systems. What is going on here? The hackers are targeting gamers to gain login credentials for a reason. So they are expressly trying to gain access to players' accounts so that they can sell them. This is not an unheard of situation. In the early days of WoW, people had their accounts breached, and they were one of the first places to unveil two-factor authentication with a little doodad dongle that gave you a code, an additional code that you had to input before you could even log in. Now, there were ways that people circumvented that thing, and it wasn't absolutely foolproof, because two-factor authentication is not foolproof, but it helps to keep your information and your accounts safe. So the problem here is that gaming sites have a wealth of data. They have large user bases, and they have enough people that hackers can exploit people to sell accounts so that they make money and run away scot-free. But not only do they gain money, they also gain access to full names and addresses, which makes people vulnerable to bigger attacks, not just stealing credit card information, but also knowing where you are and making it easier to potentially dox you, making it easier for identity theft. This is the big problem. And why did this come about? Because a lot of video games and video game sites require or have a ton of in-game currency that can be purchased and microtransactions. And what this does is cause people to put their credit card details or their banking information into these sites willy-nilly so that they can buy and get whatever thing it is that they're looking for in-game. There are reasons why microtransactions are bad. It's not just because of the gambling potential aspect or the RNG or ways you can potentially just grab money from the players, but also your entire information can be leaked as a result of your information, your credit cards being tied to your accounts. A lot of times when you see Discord hacks or Steam hacks or anything like that, they're looking for that data. They're not necessarily looking for your game specifically unless they know they can make a lot of money on it. And that really just depends on what types of games that you're playing. This is a huge problem because it means that gaming sites are becoming more and more a giant target. There is a reason why you want to make sure that you have two-factor authentication, that you're using different passwords, that you're signed up with password managers, and you're doing everything that you can, because it is becoming a bigger issue, and there is a reason why it is becoming harder and harder to do anything and for people to keep money that they have gained, because there are a lot of people that are managing to get into gaming accounts because there isn't a lot of security. And especially if you're looking at indie companies, they do not have the resources to protect their players by having extra stuff. I mean, you can even look as far as New World, I believe, had scripting that you could type in chat and you had a way to stop people from being able to do anything in the game. And if you were a newer player and you weren't like high up, there was a way that people could basically boot you from the game using the chat, because there was just simply not enough protections put on the video game. Even further than that, recently, Destiny 2 went through an issue where people in Crucible were able to use the in-game chat to send a message to a person, which forced the person's computer to kick them out of the game and effectively cause them to not be able to achieve whatever it is that they were looking to achieve, all because they were butthurt or because they could. Games are incredibly vulnerable right now, and you want to make sure that, like Riot with League of Legends implementing a two-factor authentication system, that most games are going to have this as the standard if it already isn't, because of situations like this where it's not just to make your life difficult, it's to try and protect your data from leaking onto the dark web. This is a massive thing. And if it's becoming more and more common because of the microtransactions and because of the amount of accessibility to gain that information through your gaming accounts, that is not a great place to be. And I hope that things improve and that we find a better way to protect people's informations, because ultimately no one is wholly safe. So, thank you for being part of the Patreon. I appreciate every single one of you that are here. I apologize for the delay in information and videos in the last month due to real life situations. I know this video went a very long time because I ranted about Destiny 2 for a while, but if you're interested in having a dialogue about any and all of these topics, please do not forget to become part of the Discord server, or message me on Twitter or anything like that, or even leave a comment on Patreon directly. That would be fantastic. Then I know that you guys are interested in this content. And if you have suggestions on things you would like me to cover in future, let me know, and I would be more than happy to consider any of the information. But with that, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate all of your faces. You guys have a great day, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.